Hey everybody, Mike Giardina here with CrossFit Health at the Symposium for Metabolic Health, and we're here with Dr. Robert CYWES, and we're going to talk a little bit about self-speak and how self-speak, I don't know if influence is the right word, but you know how this plays out, whether you're trying to start, let's say, start a new diet, start doing CrossFit or any other fitness program, and then what happens when you've started this new behavior and you fall off, right? You go out with some friends and you have a bad meal or you miss your workouts. How do you get back on track? Okay, so I'd love to start off with what influences self-speak, how you talk to yourself when you're trying to start something new. And let's start off with, because we were talking about this a little bit before our interview, initiating something like CrossFit, right? Let's say I'm in, for lack of a better way to describe it, poor health, and I've seen CrossFit, I've seen people do it, I've seen that there's some pretty drastic improvements that could be achieved if I can get myself into that gym, but how do I get myself into that gym? Especially if I don't have an athletic background. I don't come up from a family that has, you know, fitness and sport as part of their DNA.
Right. So, you know, Mike, what I've looked at a lot with my patients, with the folks that I work with, is every human being is defined by the conversation you have with yourself.
Okay.
And the conversation is heavily based on what I call your locus of validation. And locus of validation, if you do things that you are proud of, that locus of validation is internal because it's about self-affirmation. When I do something and I say, I don't want to tap my mic, but
yes,
give myself that back pat and say, wow, I'm proud of you. Nobody else's opinion matters.
Right.
What matters is I put effort into something and I'm proud of the effort. Now, there are two ways that can be contaminated. First and foremost, some people are raised where, you know what, they have an idea, yeah, I should go to CrossFit, but you know, I'm a blob, I need to go. And then they find 10 reasons why it's a bad idea. And so they have a problem, they're very permissive, they don't have boundaries, they don't have structure to their lives. Nobody's fault, but it's just the way they were raised, and they're unable to sustainably execute. Or they go once and they, yeah, I'm into this, and the next day they wake up, they're a little sore and stiff like everybody is the first, and they find a reason. It's never that I'm sore and stiff and I'm afraid to go, because that's not part of your self-speak. It's like, you know what, I really should go, but I hurt my ankle. There's always something.
Sure.
The second group of people are raised in what I call an authoritarian way, where their locus of validation is not internal, because it's all about the outcome, not the effort. You see, the return of investment is on the effort. You can go to the gym and feel awful, just didn't feel like going, you feel horrible, you maybe have a bit of a cold coming on, you've even got a hangover, but you get your butt in the door and you work out for 10 minutes. That should be more self-affirming to you because you made it happen. But if you walk into the gym and say, I have to be here for an hour, I have to lift this amount of weights, I have to do this, you're always going to fall short.
Yeah.
And when you are outcome-based, then you're always falling short of what you actually did because you created ridiculous outcome metrics for yourself. Then you can't self-affirm because it's no longer about the effort you put in, it's about the result you didn't achieve. And that gap is filled with an incredibly erosive sense of self. Your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your self-respect is eroded because I'm never good enough. And we get raised in those families.
Absolutely.
So, and those folks will go in and be ashamed to be in there because they're always looking at somebody else. I mean, I come from an authoritarian family background. I looked at you and I said, oh my God, I got to talk to this guy? Look at him. He looks ridiculously good. And here I am, a blob.
No.
And it's still, as much as I have that language with myself, my confidence has grown tremendously, it's still part of who I am because I come from a highly authoritarian family.
Well, as you explain this, it's something that hits home pretty hard with me as well, and it's I've been doing CrossFit since 2005, and I had competed and at a reasonably high level earlier on in CrossFit competitions, but went to the games 6 times, but I was in this position with training for such a long time with CrossFit where I didn't enjoy training, right? the pressure was always on to get
Well,
better.
let me stop you for a second, Mike.
myself
You
against
threw
other
something out in the first, and we reveal where our head is.
Yeah.
You threw something out that I'm very attuned to with my patients.
Okay.
Within the second sentence, you said, I competed. You had to let me know that you competed.
Yeah.
That is an external form of validation because you're
Totally.
competing for somebody else's praise.
100%.
And because the competition required something of you that didn't just make you feel wonderful.
Yeah.
Now that you're not necessarily competing,
Yeah.
you got your game back. Because
yeah.
now it's, self-speak is about me and me.
Yeah.
It's never about anybody else. But when you're competing, whether it's a competition or whether you're fighting somebody else, you're trying to meet somebody else's standards, it becomes very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And you don't enjoy it as much because when you have a bad day, it's I'm terrible. When you have a good day, I wasn't good enough.
Right.
So because there is no end point. But when you say, man, I felt great today, now in little increments you've built up self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-respect. So even you can have that insight to say, wow, you know what? Look at my self-speak. Mm-hmm. And right now it's about the conversation I have with myself that, yeah, I had a good workout.
Yeah. It creeps in every once in a while.
It creeps in,
still.
of course it does. Just like it did with me.
Yeah. Generally, it is about the experience, and I feel good. I mean, I just feel great doing what I'm doing. But there are those times where, yeah, I can feel that I'm not good enough, or the workout didn't go as planned, and it's like I got to do it again, or I'm not progressing anymore. I'm regressing. All those different things. So. It's really interesting how it tends to pop up, but generally, for the most part, the enjoyment is back in training for the sake of.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It isn't about what you show other people.
Yeah.
It's about, because ultimately, fitness, athleticism, I call it physical activity because it encompasses a whole genre. Some people just go for a walk. Some people pound it out in the gym. Totally. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Physical activity is a primal endorphin activator.
Yeah.
It is one of the 4 or 5 core things that we do in an effort-based way to have a strong core, a strong sense of self.
Yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of people are raised in a way where they, for authoritarian or permissive reasons, don't have the capacity to benefit. They either don't put the effort in or the effort is meaningless. And then they outsource their sense of self so that they look for an external source of validation.
Right.
Either you're doing things for other people. So all these people that have to compete, that have to be brilliant, perhaps they're not doing it for themselves. Yeah. They're looking for the affirmation from other people. And the affirmation from others can never be conditional, unconditional at least. Now, in what I do for a living, which is carbohydrate addiction, where people are they've migrated away from eating primarily for nutrition, and they're eating more and more using sugar and starch and snacking as a drug.
Sure.
As an external thing to get themselves high.
Yeah.
That is addiction is the ultimate source of external validation. I can't make myself feel good, so I need to eat a Twinkie to make me feel good. And we're looking for that instant high, but it's never good enough because on the back there's negativity, there's guilt, there's remorse, there's harm.
Well, it's just like drugs.
Just like drugs. So, you can turn something like an effort-based athletic performance into the best drug that you can get high on with no negative.
Yeah.
I don't care if I go for a 5-minute walk or I work out in the gym for an hour.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pumped because I'm proud of myself.
Right.
Whereas if you said I have to, you're in all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
And you know what? Every now and then we go in with an idea of what we want to do and we fall short.
Yeah.
Or you wake up one morning and you're feeling a bit down and depressed and you pig out on a bunch of waffles and pancakes and you miss the workout and you feel terrible. You drink a few too many beers. How do you recover from that?
Yeah.
And that's self-speak.
Interesting.
Because you beat the crap out of yourself. No, you don't. Look, I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Mistakes happen. If you can objectify your mistake and say, look, it happened. I'm not a terrible person because I did that. Mm-hmm. At the time, I didn't recognize I was down or depressed or frustrated. I self-medicated in a way that's not conducive to me. Here's how I get back on track. And you consciously force yourself to do something you love to do that requires effort. It might be some meditation. It might be a conversation with someone. Mm-hmm. It might just be putting on some music. It might be going for a walk or going to the gym. And it should be done alone.
Interesting.
It should be done alone so that you can then restore self-affirmation. It's fine to go to the CrossFit gym and be with all your buddies. But when you're recovering from going sideways, I don't call it maybe a relapse, but really going sideways, mm-hmm. where you needed emotional restitution, but you found it in the wrong place. Getting back on track requires a little bit of alone time, just to mend the fences and restore positive self-speak. Because we go down the rabbit hole. I'm a terrible person, I'm horrible, why did I do that? I'm useless, I'm pathetic. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to need more drugs and more bad behavior to make you feel better.
Okay, so a couple things I'm noticing here. So one of a good approach is some level of acceptance, accept that this was a mistake and mistakes happen.
Objectify it.
Yeah. Objectify it.
Don't subjectify it, because then you attach I'm a terrible person to it.
Right. And then spend some time alone kind of resolving it.
I've got a little phrase that I use. I actually stole it from someone. None of my phrases are my own. I hear them and I incorporate them. But I can tell you, and you've probably can say the same thing, I've spent my hardest moments alone when other people thought I was just doing fine.
Yeah.
And it's that alone time where you need to go, not to dive into a pit of depression, but to really have that conversation with yourself
sort some stuff out.
and sort stuff out, sort through stuff. There are some people who can chat to other people and use human connection as a way to restore faith. But the problem is when we've had that, when we've gone sideways a little bit, we don't feel so good about ourselves. And it becomes very, very difficult to trust somebody else implicitly or to be vulnerable with them. There are people that do, but the greatest strength a human being can have is vulnerable human connection.
Right.
When you can talk about things you're a little ashamed of. Some people can. My wife is just fantastic at that. I'm not. I need that alone time, but I need to do something that I can affirm about. And that's self-speak. That's part of the conversation we have with ourselves. The only people that are perfect are the gum flappers on the internet. Those, you see them every day and they're out there doing their thing. And,
yeah, for sure.
I'm not that. I am not that.
So let's talk a little bit about what you, or not what, who you tend to work with most, and that is adolescents or from what age group? What is the age group that you?
We will work. My own son started this path before he was a zygote, before he was 2 cells. So we start the best time to start when you're planning pregnancy. And it's not just the eating and the drinking. It's not just the fitness. It's how are we going to raise this child with a valuable sense of self, a sense of self where they're not arrogant, not narcissistic. They're quietly humble. I think it's Tim McGraw's song. That Humble and Kind song is like an anthem for me.
Perfect.
Because it's about being proud of who you are, but you're humble on the outside.
Right.
People who like to show off to others because they need their affirmation.
Right.
Complete polar opposite. So we work with young children. It's much, much easier to start somebody out from birth along these pathways and help the parents. It's more difficult to turn people around, but that's the majority of what we end up doing. So throughout life, whether it's obesity, whether it's people that are athletes trying to get better, whether it is people that are athletes that are finding, okay, I'm 35, 40, my body isn't performing like it used to perform. I could eat a certain way, now I'm not doing it. And what do athletes do when they start getting a little bit of a belly and they start lagging behind? They go to the gym, they run harder, they run more, they put on more miles on their bodies, and things get worse. So we've got to look at the eating and the drinking side and say, okay, what's happening internally? You see, the thing about it is that food is toxic, or not so much food, but things that we eat and drink that aren't good for us are toxic at entry into the body. They aren't toxic necessarily through weight. You can eat a pile of crap, and in my case it's carbohydrates, and go to the gym and burn it off.
Sure.
But the damage was already done. Nobody smokes 3 cigarettes and goes to the gym to blow out the nicotine. Okay, that's ludicrous. Okay?
Right, that's a
But fat people love to pig away and then, they get on the treadmill and they burn 1,000 calories. Well, then ice cream's only 90 calories and they justify eating the ice cream.
Easy, it's easy to do.
We do that all the time.
Yeah,
and we try to burn off the mistakes we made. No, you cannot fix history.
And it's some of the messaging somewhat promotes that the only thing that matters is calories in versus calories out. Look, it doesn't matter what I'm eating. This is the caloric quantity of it. Here's what I'm doing on the treadmill. Here are the calories that I'm burning. Wipes it out. Doesn't matter.
So I'll tell you something interesting. It's impossible to get fat from eating food. And the reason for that, no, it's not true. Well, there's two very important things that you need to understand. The first thing is this: the human body is brilliant in the way it's constructed.
Yeah.
Yours a little bit more than mine, but be that as it may, I got to throw that one out there. A little envy there. But the point is that we have checks and balances when we're doing things that the human body requires. I'll give you an example. One of the coolest things that the human body does, and a guy by the name of Tim Noakes, who's been a mentor for me for years, said this: what regulates fatigue?
Okay, so this is interesting because you said Tim Noakes, and so I went through a exercise physiology program through a bachelor's and a master's, and I loved the idea. I loved Dr. Noakes' one, central governor theory, and then two, the way that he challenged a very established theory of VO2 max.
Mike, he challenged himself. I knew Tim when I was 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
I was in his first ever physiology class as a young medical
Wow.
student, okay? So he and I go way back.
Yeah.
And Tim, he's nuts. He used to go on these ultra marathons with a needle in his hand.
Yeah.
And while he was running, he was jabbing his thigh, taking muscle biopsies to look at glycogen. Because the prevailing theory, and Tim says this, what made him famous as an exercise physiologist, many things, but one of the dominant things was the muscle fatigue. That when your muscles ran out of energy, glycogen, glucose, you bonked.
Yeah.
But and he's now over 70 years old. He's just had this epiphany from a group of Swedish sports writers
Yeah.
or sports scientists who realized that that's not humanly possible. It's not possible to run out of energy in your muscles because you're going to rigor. Your muscles would seize up.
Yeah.
So the beauty about what happens with us is the human brain starts to sense that its energy supply is being threatened.
Sure.
And the brain has to have a continuous supply of sugar and ketones.
Right.
Okay? And as soon as it notices a slight dip, you're a guy, and I'm being sexist here, but us guys do this. You're driving down the road, and here in California where it's nice and hot, and your gauge gets to empty.
Yeah.
First thing you do, because you're going to try to go as far as you can, you turn off the air conditioning, you open up the windows, you drive, you try to spare that energy. Well, the brain does the same thing. And the biggest spend is your muscles if you're working out, so the brain starts to slow you down.
Right.
That's exactly the central governor theory of Tim Noakes.
Yeah.
And he actually, I'll say this, he did it on a podcast with me the very first time he spoke about it. We discussed it in detail, and it makes so much sense that the brain slows you down.
Yeah.
And no matter what you're doing, you've got to look at, okay, where's my performance and what slows me down? And in life, that's generally your head. Self-speak or energy regulation, the human brain will slow you down. It is the central governor of everything we do.
Interesting. Well, that is amazing. That is
So, I mean, that's just, it's, when you're an athlete, I said earlier on that it's impossible to get fat from eating food. Well, the human body has very, very tight regulation in terms of what you eat. Let me give you an example. You sit down, how much, you eat steak, I assume you're not,
I do.
you don't hate red meat.
I do not hate red meat. No.
So let's say you sit down and there's an 80-ounce steak in front of you. The cow just sat down. How much can you eat? That's the right answer.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
No idea.
And the reason you have no idea is because it doesn't matter. You start to eat, might be 10 ounces, 20 ounces, 30, it doesn't matter. Oh my God, I'm stuffed.
Yeah.
A signal is going from your belly to your brain that says, Mike, you're done.
You're done.
2 minutes later, you're not sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of steak, but you are sitting there with a bowl of M&Ms, a bowl of ice cream, a bowl of pretzels. In other words, you're not eating nutrition. Your body has said, Mike, you're full. You're done. It stopped you. Fat and protein, the hard stopping point. But carbohydrates, sugar and starch, no stopping point. The more you eat, the more you consume, the more buzz you get, the more you eat. You have to self-limit because there is no internal limit. I'll give you another example. You're drinking water. How much water should you drink in a day? Nobody needs to know. Why? Because your body tells you how much.
Right.
You might drink a lot, you might drink a little. But your thirst can be quenched. Someone gives you a beer, you can still drink the beer.
Yeah.
You're not drinking more water because there is no regulation for endorphin activating substances that give us a buzz that the human body doesn't need. Human body needs protein and fat. Human body needs water, doesn't need alcohol, doesn't need carbohydrates.
Interesting.
So it's a positive feedback cycle.
Right.
And that's why food doesn't make us fat, but sugar and starch does, and it gives us that buzz, so the more we eat, the more we do. And you're either going to become diabetic or obese or both based on how your body works. So that's the addiction part. So why do we do it? We do it as a dysfunctional way of emotional management. You go to the gym what would happen if you broke both your arms and both your legs?
I would assume that not being able to train as much as I do, I would be pretty down on myself.
You'd be a puddle of water. You'd be, because your world, your
100.
emotion management world, revolves around your gym routine.
Absolutely.
Well, there's plenty of obese people and diabetics whose entire world revolves around snacking and carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And if you're going to say, oh, I'm going to do a keto diet today, the day you take away those carbohydrates, it's the same as you breaking both your legs and both your arms.
Yeah.
Because their entire emotion management system has been taken away. So what you do is you replace it, you diversify. So let's say you didn't have arms and legs. Well, maybe you can listen to music, maybe you can read a book, maybe you can do some meditation. There are other avenues. Human connection, physical activity, creative arts, spirituality, meditation are the 4 cornerstones of an internalized sense of self.
So when you're working with somebody who is using carbohydrates as a way to emotionally regulate, as you're starting to strip those foods away, you're replacing them with another way to regulate their emotions.
Because if you remove their drug of choice,
Yeah.
what are you going to replace it with?
have
Because life can be good. It's easy to not eat carbohydrates on an easy day. But when life throws you that emotional curveball, where are you going to go?
Which happens.
That's
life. It's gonna
If
happen
you
all the
miss
time.
a workout on a day where you're having a lot of fun, you know what, not good, but at the same time the world didn't end. But if you're having an awful day where things are just going bad and you can't get to a gym or a workout, you're in all kinds of trouble. No different.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be an athlete. You know,
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is not an athlete, but from a young child, writing music and playing music was her gym.
Yeah.
So there are thespians, there are musicians, there are people that work out in the gym, but those are all internal forms of validation. Those are all things we do, and there's never ever a bad thing. You go to the gym and you work out and you pull a muscle, or you drop a weight on your foot and you break your toe. You were just a klutz. It's not that the gym was bad, but you eat a tub of ice cream every day and now you got diabetes.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
So doing what we do, an effort-based emotion management system, is never negative. That's why it's so uplifting. That's why that self-speak is so big. And if we can take young kids and teach them a set of effort-based emotion management systems, and you cannot outsource this. Nobody can go to the gym for you. Okay, shake weights don't work.
Right.
You know, or those tubes. You know, those. You can't outsource. Right. You can't outsource what we do for self-affirmation.
Yeah.
Okay. If you do, you're looking for external validation.
Right.
So you can take that child and teach them to learn to love themselves based on what they do. Then, what other people say about them is, in addition to that, it is not a dependency.
And you label that as effort-based
Emotion management system.
Okay, and so what else falls within that realm outside of fitness or exercise?
Physical activity. And I use physical activity to describe the entire bunch.
Walks,
Now,
it doesn't matter.
physical activity, mobility, is the most important aspect of healthy longevity. But it includes strength and endurance when you're young, but then later on, flexibility and balance.
Yeah.
You talk to a 75-year-old person,
Yeah.
it's more about flexibility and balance that keeps them alive than anything else. But those 4 things are mobility or physical activity.
Sure.
The second one is creative arts. And it could be reading, writing, music, fashion, photography. It doesn't matter. Something creative where you disappear becomes a fortress of solitude. You know, when you're in the gym, the world can dissolve around you. You're working out because that's your zone.
There's this ultimate sense of presence, if you wanted to call it.
Exactly right. When Taylor Swift is writing or playing music, the audience is nice.
Yeah.
But she's doing it for herself.
Yeah.
And if you're religious, a spiritual moment, might be church, might be the Bible, but it's really about a communication with a higher power.
Right.
Or a moment of meditation.
Yeah.
Or when you're engaged with someone in an empathetic human connection. And those are the toughest ones.
Yeah.
Because you have to trust the person
There's
implicitly.
that vulnerability.
Right.
piece.
If you don't trust someone, you're not going to be vulnerable about things you're a little ashamed of. But when you've had a good conversation with someone you trust, someone you care about, and you've been open, that bond is so strong.
Yeah.
And those are the 4 elements. And then a healthy sexual relationship with someone that you care about.
Yeah.
Those 5 things are the healthiest, most powerful sources of emotion management that any human being can have. And when you've internalized that, you don't need anybody else's affirmation.
Yeah.
And that's the self-speak we need.
Gosh, I love this.
Does that make sense? So if you're going to raise that child,
Yeah.
teach them the value of effort. Yes, you put effort in up front. You've got to assign time and hardship up front, but that reward is limitless on the back end. And it's about building self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-respect.
And that reward is for you, it's not for anyone
Of course,
else.
of course.
Yeah.
Other people's approval is nice, but you can then afford to be completely humble about everything.
Yeah.
Because your pride is inside.
Yeah.
As my friend Tim McGraw's
Yeah.
song goes.
Yeah.
I don't know Tim McGraw at all, but I wish I did. But the point is that when we externalize that,
Yeah.
that's when we're looking for other people, and then we shine our coat. So we put on airs and graces that don't necessarily belong to us.
Right.
We try to be better than we are. Internet perfect.
Yeah. And at that point, it's never enough, right? There's always someone else to try to impress.
And someone's always going to say, yeah, that's good, but what about this?
Right. Right. Or you can say to yourself, oh, that's great, but he's better.
Exactly right. It's never about outcomes. It's about effort.
Yeah.
And the beauty is, let me ask you another question along these lines. Do you know who the Dalai Lama is, or the Dalai Lama? He's a spiritual leader in
The
Tibet.
Dalai Lama?
Yeah, Dalai Lama,
Yeah.
yeah. Would you say that he's an expert at meditation?
I would assume, but I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, you've been doing CrossFit since before you were born,
Yeah.
okay? Would you say you're an expert at CrossFit?
Yes.
Okay, you're absolutely not. And neither is the Dalai Lama. And here's why. And he will tell you this. He's not an expert. He may be the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
But he's a student. Because if you're an expert, I'm done.
Then you just stop
I'm done.
learning.
I'm
Yeah,
done. I've got it. I
that's
know it
great.
all.
Yeah.
If I'm a student, no matter how good I am, every day there's more to be done. And I know what gets you up in the morning is being able to go to the gym and not repeat what you did yesterday, but do something new.
Yeah. Improve. do
That
something
keep that
new.
there's
Yeah.
something more I have to do. And as long as there's always more, this is a journey. There is no end point. There are milestones,
Yeah.
but there's never ever an end point or a goal.
Yeah.
It ends 10 minutes after we're dead. And as long as you're chasing that, you're never going to be knocked sideways.
Yeah.
Or you may stray a little bit, but you're not going
Get back
backwards.
on.
Absolutely. And that's what we help our patients to do, because it's not about how well you do on one day.
Yeah.
It's about how well you sustain the pathway.
And you're doing it for you. That's the big part. I love it.